Good morning. The September 2nd Board of Education meeting is now in session. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2.03, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All those in favor? The minutes have been approved. Item 2.04, establish agenda order, and the agenda stands as published. Item 2.05, recognitions. We do not have any recognitions today. And item 2.06 is Educator of the Month. Mrs. Birch.
Thank you. Today, the Board of Education honors an educator in our school system who has a deep understanding of student needs, and her growth mindset goes far beyond the curriculum in which she teaches. Penny Dusak, second grade teacher at Deal Elementary School, is thorough in her planning and engages her students in the learning process. Her philosophy of student learning is obvious as she provides a structured learning environment that is differentiated to meet all of her students' needs. Mrs. Dusak is results-oriented and uses student achievement data to guide her next steps. Mrs. Dusak fully commits to everything she does for the well-being of all students at her school. As the advisor for the Sea Perch Club at Deal Elementary, Penny provides students with hands-on, real-world STEM experiences. Her work with the Bay Grasses in Classes program, in collaboration with Arlington Echo, offered her second grade students an outdoor education experience that encouraged environmental stewardship in the students' very own community, all while providing memories to last a lifetime. Mrs. Dusak works very hard to make a positive impact on each of her students. She's very growth-oriented, taking students from where they are and strives to get them beyond even her own expectations. She provides excellent feedback to students and parents through her quarterly report cards describing the here and now as well as what can be expected in the future. Penny Dusak is on at all times. She is focused, planned, and goal-oriented each day. There's a deliberateness to her decision-making and a seriousness about her role as the teacher each and every day. Because of this, she expects the best of herself and her students. Her daily efforts in and out of the classroom help promote positive growth for the students at Deal Elementary. Her commitment to providing enriching and engaging lessons truly makes an impact on the students both academically and socially. The positive impact of her thoughtfully planned lessons and the personal connections she makes are demonstrated through the success her students experience and the relationships she builds with each child. Penny Dusak, you are an exemplary model for your primary colleagues. Your outstanding contributions are neither heavy-handed nor assertive, but they reflect the respect and generous spirit that you hold for all people. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all ships. So for these reasons and more, the Board of Education is proud to recognize you as Educator of the Month for September 2015. Congratulations, and please join me up front.
Good secret keeper.
I'm shocked. Yeah, I'm Colleen Harris, of course, my former principal. It's just, well, it's shocking.
Thank you so much for all you do for our kids. We really appreciate everything. So congratulations.
Thank you. I love my job.
Item 2.07 is Employee of the Month, Mrs. Hubbard.
Right. Today we celebrate an employee in our school system who is motivated in her position and takes great pride in her school. Her pride comes from caring, and her motive comes from the students of Point Pleasant Elementary School. When Valinda Jones began her new role last year as chief custodian, she did it with gusto. During her interview, she said that she would treat Point Pleasant as her home, and she has proven exactly that. She learned very quickly how to navigate a very large elementary facility, and she does it every day, maintaining the highest of standards. From the floors down the main hallway to the floors of her boiler room, Ms. Jones strives to maintain a pristine place for students and staff to come and learn. Last December, during winter holiday, Ms. Jones buffed all the floors in the school. And when a staff member complimented her on the floor, she said, "I just want to make sure the school looks good. If the school looks good, then the students want to learn." Now that's motivation. Ms. Jones is a quick responder when it comes to pitching in. She has lent an extra hand during lunch duty and always interacts with the students in a pleasant and positive manner. She can always be found in the early morning fulfilling requests by teachers and staff who comment on how quickly she responds. Her calm demeanor and strong work ethic make her an invaluable employee. Valinda Jones sets a good example for other custodians, and she emulates this through her actions and her words. She encourages her crew to work hard and take pride in what they do. She's been known to work shoulder to shoulder with the evening crew to show them how she expects the areas to be cleaned. She would never ask her crew to do anything she would not do herself. Instead, she pushes up her sleeves and works side by side on her own time. Valinda Jones, you perform consistently with a high degree of professionalism. You demonstrate good work ethics on a daily basis by being punctual, hardworking, and paying close attention to the smallest of details. You keep a positive attitude, and you always look for the good in all people. Because of you, Point Pleasant Elementary School shines. So for these reasons and more, the Board of Education is pleased to recognize you Employee of the Month for September 2015. Congratulations. A bell with your name that you can ring at lunchtime to keep them all in line. So how did they get you here today?
She tricked me.
She tricked you.
Yeah, she told me I had to come here. I asked her, I said, "Am I being fired today?" And she goes, "No, we wouldn't bring you to the board for that." My son, my supervisor, my daughter, my niece, my nephew, my sister, my best friend in life, just everybody.
That's wonderful.
Including Robbie All.
Well, congratulations. We all know that the custodians make or break a school, and you obviously do a great job. So
I love
congratulations.
my job too.
Ms. Jones, we're going to have you stay for a photo op as well. Volunteer of the Month, item 2.08, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Ms. Korbalak. As is true for many of our wonderful school volunteers, September's Volunteer of the Month began with weekly dedicated visits to her daughter's kindergarten classroom. Her school involvement soon extended to spearheading fundraisers, competently assisting teachers and staff, and working effectively with struggling students across the grades. Over the last 4 years, this devoted volunteer hasn't looked back. Today, the Board of Education is proud to honor one of Hillsmere Elementary School's outstanding volunteers, Mrs. Kelsa McLaughlin. Mrs. McLaughlin constantly extends help to all teachers and staff, always willing to undertake any task that allows them more time with their students. The entire school community deeply appreciates this volunteer's commitment to student achievement and her organizational talents. Her flair for organizing and fundraising is instrumental for the PTA's largest annual fundraiser, the Hillsmere Fun Fair, and recently a GoFundMe campaign for improved student technology. But it's Mrs. McLaughlin's determined leadership that established a highly successful after-school enrichment program that is inspiring praise and similar initiatives at other schools. Through her years as a volunteer classroom assistant, Mrs. McLaughlin observed many students' desire to improve their writing skills. When the Hillsmere Staff Committee was actively seeking ways to inspire and improve students' written expression, Mrs. McLaughlin and a few other volunteers eagerly joined the challenge. The idea of an after-school writing and publishing program was hatched, but funds were needed for the supplies and after-school buses. No problem. Mrs. McLaughlin recruited and organized the Hillsmere running team for the Ripley race and earned Hillsmere $2,000. In February of 2014, the Hillsmere Publishing Company was launched. This innovative enrichment program continues to spark an infectious enthusiasm for excellent expressive writing among Hillsmere students. With loads of encouragement, writing guidance, and many drafts, students submit their final drafts to Mrs. McLaughlin for typing and binding. Each author is honored to read their published pieces aloud to classmates from the very special Hillsmere Publication Company Authors Chair. No wonder the Hillsmere Publishing Company won an AACPS Exemplary Program Award at last May's Volunteers Recognition Tea. Mrs. McLaughlin's dedication and loving persistence to enrich Hillsmere Elementary School in so many ways has earned her grateful praise from the entire school community. Thank you, Mrs. McLaughlin. Would you please come forward? With great appreciation, I would like to present this Volunteer of the Month certificate and bell to you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How did you get here today? What did they
Well,
spring on you?
Mrs. Matioski, our former principal, said, you need to come with me because we're going to have the opportunity to talk about the Hillsmere Publishing Company.
Okay.
And so here I am. I'll do anything.
And who's here with you today?
My two daughters, Nora and Natalie, my husband Reed, my partner in crime in volunteering, Kathy Schaefer, our awesome kindergarten teacher, where I began it all, Miss Norris, and our school staff, Mr. Mitchell and Miss Romanchuk.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
I'd like to present you with this certificate.
Thank you.
I'd like to get a picture of it. Get a nice bell for you here.
Oh, my kids are going to like this.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to coming to Hillsmere. I'd like to learn more about the publishing company. That sounds very exciting.
Bring your rough draft. Thank you.
Before we start school and community highlights, I just wanted to welcome our County Council Chair, Jerry Walker, today, and our County Executive, Steve Shue, who snuck in. Welcome. Mrs. Nally.
Well, my favorite beginning of school is always visiting schools, and this year, over the last couple of weeks, Dr. Arlotto and the majority of our school board members have visited schools, and it has been a remarkable beginning. I visited 16 schools, a friend of mine called and said, what are you doing for lunch today? I said, oh, I'm traveling from Van Bachlen to Tracy's. That's 37 miles. She said, what? I said, I'm touring schools, and I am having the best time ever. I was impressed with the Dr. Arlotto, and I noted, you know, the instruction was underway right away. Yesterday morning, visiting I was downtown Annapolis Elementary. I have 3 grandchildren there. They were all happy to see me. They are in elementary school. They wouldn't be later, but it was so exciting. I also want to tell you that I am impressed and appreciative of how many of our elected officials have taken the time out of their schedule. County Executive Shue, Jerry Walker, and Aimee Brandenburg of the Education Liaison to the for Mr. Shue. It is so important, and I invite the elected officials to come and walk into our schools. Look at what our teachers are doing, what our school secretaries have done, what our custodial staff. These buildings are shining, and watch these smiling faces come in and use all the technology that, thank you very much, our elected officials are making sure we have in our schools. And it is just impressive. And I just think every day how lucky I've been to work with this school system. Thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I echo what Ms. Nally said in terms of being able to go out and visit schools and to see all the great stuff that's happening. It's absolutely amazing, because on the first day of school, I remember I remember some of the first days of school, but you were busy putting your learning how to open your lockers. You were busy, just trying to learn names and things like that. There was really no learning going on. And there's definite learning going on the first day of school. It's absolutely amazing to me. And it's also amazing to me for some of these teachers in these elementary schools who have, unfortunately some of our classes are a little larger than we'd like, but they know their kids' names right away. I mean, third day of school, they know all of their kids' names. I'm overly impressed with the fact that they connect so quickly, because that's always a big thing people are talking about. Our kids aren't connected to our teachers, and they are. What's going on in our buildings is second to none in any place in Maryland. I don't think there's any place doing as good as we are. So I thank all the people who are working in our school system. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting us invade your classrooms, because sometimes there was quite large contingencies of us walking through. But the teachers were just right on point. They didn't deviate. They kept their kids focused. The kids stayed focused. It was an excellent time, and I always look forward to being able to visit with schools on the first day of schools. It's great.
Mrs. Summer.
I'm going to echo. I visited 12 schools over the past week, and I loved every one of them. It always brings back, I want to be back in the classroom, because I get so excited. All the teachers were so engaged and enthusiastic, and the buildings just shone. Like I said, the custodian makes or breaks the school, and those schools looked great this past week, and the kids were ready to go. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to go to various parts of the county and see the things that are going on, talk to the EEE teachers as they're getting ready to start up their programs, and just see the wide variety of things. We visited 2 schools that are starting up PYP's programs. Been just so many exciting new things coming out there. I think my favorite moment was the little kindergartner at Seven Oaks who told me, "You sound just like a cowgirl." And I was like, I'm not sure what that means, but I'm going to take it. That's good. But I had a great time, and looking forward to the rest of the year. If it was this great the first week, by January, we're going to be busting out all over.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say to all the folks in the audience, elected officials, but more importantly, everyone else that's out there, before I got on the school board, I would sit out there in the audience, and there were always a lot of seats that were available. I'm glad to see that most of them are full today. I hope you'll come back again. This is your school board. You paid for this. Thank you for being here.
Dr. Arlotto.
Thank you. I've got lots to say, so settle in. It is fabulous to be back in another school year. Having empty buildings during the summer is just no fun, and so we've got the kids back in the building. over 80,000 strong, and it's just been a fabulous week and a half to start the school year. I've been in 28 buildings so far, and they look fabulous. I was able to attend the opening of Lothian, and if you haven't seen the new Lothian, you need to get down there and see it. It is beautiful, a wonderful design, fabulous natural light throughout the building on both the first and second floor. It is wonderful. We've welcomed, Flory, almost 600 new teachers to our school system. We are delighted they've joined us as part of their career and their adventure in life. We are delighted with the almost 600 teachers that we've hired. We've opened PYP, our primary years program, in 2 new sites this year. We've opened up EE. We've moved on from not just North County, but now in the Meade and the Southern clusters. Thank you to the team for making that happen. It is very exciting to introduce EE into those schools. Ms. Jones, I am so delighted you are here because I wanted to comment on, if you will, the beauty of our buildings. Some are newer than others. Some are not so new. And it is you and your colleagues that do an amazing job. Education, ladies and gentlemen, in Anne Arundel County starts at the curb and works its way in. And you are as important to delivery and instruction as our teachers and assistant principals and principals. So thank you to you and your colleagues. Dan is here, Chris is here, Mike McCaffrey. You and your team have done an amazing job, along with all our chiefs and custodians, to get the buildings ready, because that's important. We don't get a second first day. That first day for each of our kindergartners or second graders or 7th graders or 12th graders is as important as day 2, 3, and 4. So I thank you for your work. Thank you, Mrs. Jones. I'm delighted that you're here. Again, our facilities team done an amazing job. Technology, over 17,000 computers and tablets and Chromebooks and the rest of it up and running in the buildings. All of our smart boards. It's wonderful to see them all in action. Transportation, not an easy task. We welcome a new transportation director. Thank you, Les. We're delighted that you've joined us here in Anne Arundel County, and we're delighted that you're part of the team. It has just been a fabulous opening. Let me also say, if I can, some interesting news that just a few minutes ago, MSD announced that there are 7 finalists for the Maryland Teacher of the Year, and our Jenny Merrill at Severna Park Elementary School is one of those 7 finalists. Jenny is our 3rd state finalist in the last 5 years, and the Teacher of the Year will be named on October 9th. So stay tuned. Many of you, the best thing about seeing the schools, as I've always said, is seeing the people. Our staff members and our children and their smiling faces. That has been fabulous. And many of you have seen the photos with our hashtag AACPS Back to School, Back to Awesome campaign. So many of the schools, so many parents, so many of you have taken pictures of your children on the first couple of days of school and sent them in. It has been an overwhelming success. Our folks in design and print and communications put the best of those together into 3-minute videos that contain more than 500 photos. And we want to share a little bit of that with you today. So here's some of the video, Bob. Bob, thank you to your team. Thank you to your team in communications, Bob, and design and print. Fabulous. All the hundreds and hundreds of pictures sent in, and those 3 videos that we pushed out from the communications, design and print offices were viewed more than 18,000 times. So we had our hashtag at the beginning of school, hashtag AACPS Back to Awesome campaign, and we are awesome. And so the campaign going forward for us will be hashtag AACPS Awesome, because there are some school systems that want to be good. There are others that want to be great. Why not just be awesome? And so we're really excited about the new campaign coming up, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to echo what my colleagues and Dr. Arlato said. Ms. Jones, our buildings are A+. Everywhere we went. Thank you to you and your colleagues. And I want to also thank TAC President Richard Benford for coming on the visits with us. I think you made it to every school. Thank you. It's important. I think a couple of my favorite highlights, I got to have a poetry lesson with the 3rd grade and then get in my car and do a poetry lesson with my 13th graders. That was really awesome. But the number one thing we had was very first day of school, this little boy saying, "Oh, I think this guy here is like the president of all the schools." And his little friend says, "Well, then who are these people?" He says, "They're his paparazzi." So the paparazzi's going to move on, and we'll take item 2.10, the CAC report, and then we'll take a short break for pictures. No report. So we're going to take a break for pictures. We can do the employee, the volunteer, the educator of the month. If you guys will step out in the hall, and then we'll come back for the facilities utilization master plan. 1, the Strategic Facilities Utilization Master Plan. And this is a review item, and we have a presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. My name is Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer at Arundel County Public Schools, and I'm joined here by our two facility study partners from MGT, and I'd like to allow them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
My name is Ed Humble, and I am the Director of the Education Business Unit for MGT. That sounds more official than it is. I get to come to places like Anne Arundel and help you solve problems for kids, and it's so exciting to see all those opening a school and happy faces, and thank you for allowing us to be here and a part of this time of year with you.
And I'm Dodds Cromwell, Vice President for Facility Services at MGT. Been working with MGT for 20 years now and was here to help you do the 2006 study, and I'm very glad to be back again.
And so by way of background, I've had a very good fortune to be a part of a very historic and courageous project that occurred here in this district in 2005 and 2006. At that time, 4 key entities who are all represented here today, but the then Superintendent of Schools, the then Board of Education, County Executive, and County Council decided that we needed to take a very analytical, clinical, impartial, and professionalized look at the facilities situation here in Anne Arundel County, both our existing buildings as well as the programmatic needs, the capacity needs at that time, as well as into the future. And it was decided at that time that we wanted to bring in this professionalized approach, but a disinterested party, a party that had no dog in the fight is the way that I like to phrase it. And through a competitive process, a professional-based selection process, we arrived at that time at MGT of America, whose principal place of business is in Washington, but it's Washington State, not Washington, D.C. MGT came in at that time, and in July of 2006 published their recommended 10-year strategic facility utilization master plan that provided the input information, the framework around which this school district recast its capital improvement program that led us through, that was intended to lead us through the next 10 years. Those 4 entities at that time, as today, essentially agreed that once that list was finalized, that was the list that we were going to stick to, and that we were going to no longer suffer the whims of the year in, year out, who screamed the loudest, who had the best lobbying efforts, who had the most effective parental or political organization, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about buildings that architects and engineers are charged with assessing and being able to evaluate. And we're talking about instructional suitability that educational experts can weigh and judge and provide professional judgment and values to. So it is that approach that brings us here today. That original report has withstood the test of time. It was done very well. I've shared that with you and the members of the public oft and repeatedly over the course of the last 9 years. But we are 9 years later. So things do change. Our buildings have deteriorated further. Our growth and development patterns in this county have changed somewhat. Our in-migration, out-migration, birth rates, both localized and across the state, have altered somewhat, et cetera. So it is time that we arrive at this moment that we are now going to reanalyze our buildings, reanalyze our programmatic offerings, reanalyze our site and grounds, and reanalyze the technology footprint of our buildings, and provide new information that I'm hopeful will shape and aid us in shaping and formulating what our plan is for the next 10 years. With that as background, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Humble and Mr. Cromwell to lead us through their presentation this morning.
Thank you, Alex. Madam President, board members, superintendent, I'd like to thank you for having us here today. I'd like to start off by thanking you for allowing MGT to be a part of this important study. I think we all agree that education is a very important thing for our children and to have a successful future. And we really believe strongly that the buildings that our students, our children get their education in play an important aspect in creating a successful educational experience. And by creating this plan, as you did in 2006, you've created a plan that'll guide your decision making to maintaining facilities for the students that will not only just house them, but will support their educational programs and will enhance them so they get a really good 21st century education. So we thank you for allowing us to be a part of that, and we commend you for your actions in doing that. As you can see, our presentation outlines, we're going to go through all the different parts of the report. I'd like to start by just recapping the 2006 plan. As Alex touched on, in that time we identified the facility needs, and then we established recommended priorities. And then I think most important, we created a decision-making tool for the district that would allow you to make decisions on an objective basis as circumstances and elements changed in the district over time. As you can see, we identified projects by priority and by grade configuration of the schools. There was quite a lot to get done. Over $1.4 billion we projected in project budgets. And since then, with the state and county appropriations of over $1.2 million, you've been able to accomplish more than 90% of the plan, which is just fantastic. That's a very successful record. So building on that, we established the goals for the 2015 plan. And the first goal was to update the 2006 Strategic Facilities Utilization Master Plan, to provide recommendations for the next 10 years for facility capital improvements and building utilization, to examine best practices regarding school size, and to provide an inclusive, transparent process for planning. And finally, to provide a data-driven recommendations. Now that's a big job to get all that done. And as a colleague of ours used to say, he would ask the question, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time, but you better have a plan. So we created a plan to get through this big project. And this is just an outline of the task in our planning process. Obviously, we start with a project initiation where we review the goals for the district, make sure our process is going to align with meeting those goals. And then we update the facilities inventory to make sure we've got an accurate inventory of all your facilities. We believe strongly that a facilities master plan should be based on your educational goals and missions and programs. So we talk with your staff about those educational programs and delivery methods. We also go out and look at all the facilities, conduct facility assessments. Another key element is looking at the county demographics and enrollment projections to see how many students we have, where they're going to be growing in the future, how many we're going to have in the future. We take that data and combine it with your school capacities and look at how full or how empty your schools are going to be in the future. Do you need additional space or do you have excess space? That might vary throughout the county. And going through all of this process is a public involvement, community collaboration process where we try to engage the community in what we consider a conversation to develop an excellent plan. We also develop standards for ranking the needs. We realize we're going to have more needs typically than we have resources, so we need to prioritize. What helps us do that is to develop accurate budget estimates for all the projects. And then we develop multiple scenarios, if you will, of how we might accomplish the goals of the plan and then develop the final plan. So those are the tasks that we went through. We had a plan to eat the elephant, so we started eating. Now I'm going to let Mr. Humble talk about the work we did with the educational program.
And I immediately go the wrong way on the, there we go. Good old, I love technology, I really do. So as Dodd said, we lay that plan out, and there's all these pieces that we have to look at. And certainly you saw that list on there, and there's the facility conditions, and there's the number of kids, and there's the capacities. It's not by accident that the first one listed and the first one we talk about and the first one we deal with when we come to a school district is the educational priorities. Because believe it or not, some people around the country think a facilities plan is about facilities. And it's not. It's about education of kids. And it's about then the spaces that we utilize to really support that educational program. So therefore, we have to start off and really understand your educational program. I want to make it clear. Our job is not to come in here and tell you anything about what you should or shouldn't be doing in an educational program. That's your job, your staff. That all gets worked out here. But it's our responsibility to really understand that and understand where Arundel County School District wants that educational program to go. So therefore, we can go out, when we go out and assess facilities, we're assessing the facility as to how well do they support the program you want to have. And where are their needs? Are we not, do we not have the music spaces that support what we want music to do? Do we not have the science spaces that support what we want science to be? And all those different kinds of things, and vocational spaces and things that really are evolving, and we don't really know exactly where they're headed, but we kind of got some direction for it. So we spend quite a bit of time at the beginning. And what this slide is telling you, and there's a lot more detail in the report, and when you get a chance to really read through that, you'll see that. But what this slide is showing you is that we go out and really identify what your mission goals programs are. We do that through interviews with your staff. We do that through, what are the facility implications and defining that of what those programs are. And we end up with what we call the Educational Suitability and Technology Readiness Guide. That's just a sample page you can't read there, but you have copies of the complete guide that we ended up with. And what that is, there's a section like that for each of the different curricular areas, program areas, sometimes support areas. There's a definition there. And here are the facility implications. So now, when we go out into the buildings and we look at it, our assessors rely on this so that we're assessing the same thing as we go all over the county in every school, so that when we end up with a score, that a 60 on the north end of the county means the same thing as a 60 on the south end of the county, and go out and assess the school based on that educational criteria. We also do what we call the Technology Readiness Guide, which is kind of a supplement to this. And that is, where do we want technology to go? How do we want to be utilizing technology? We don't go out and count the number of computers in classrooms. We say, does the facility have the infrastructure to support the number of computers you want, or the way that you want your staff and your students to access technology? Do you have the infrastructure to support that? So that's what we're looking for there. And so we define all of those. Then after that, once again, I go the wrong way. After that, I'm left-handed too, so that's why this always goes backwards for me. As Dodd said, we have we really want to know what the community is saying about schools. What are the community goals, directions? Let's find out. We did some open kind of meetings. We called them community engagement sessions. We did a first round where we asked the community for input. Did that at both Annapolis High School and Old Mill High School back in March. Not great turnouts, 87, but 87 people that were passionate about what they wanted to tell us, and so we heard them. We also put the same questions, the same format that we did at the public engagement sessions online. Did that in both English and Spanish, and had that available for a couple of months period of time, and we got another 512 respondents. So that certainly gave us some more data. And then we came back and got feedback sessions, because then we came back after we had assessed the schools, had some data to share with the people, came back, did 2 meetings, very low turnout. I wish we could have gotten more. But on the other hand, the same thing again on online. We had nearly 800 participants there. So all of that data put together. What did all of that data put together tell us? Well, some things that we expected, some things maybe a little bit different. Certainly, the public said repair the specific building deficiencies. You know, my child's school's got HVAC problems. It's always too hot, or it's always too cold, or we've got a roof that leaks. Let's get in. Let's really find those. Okay, we're gonna do that. Okay. General classroom kinds of issues. We heard lots from the schools that have not yet corrected the open concept. Would you do that, please? Would you make that a priority? So we heard some of those kinds of things. Size of schools, we were told from day one that school size is an issue in Anne Arundel County. And the public also told us that are our schools too large? Will you look at that? Is there a way for what should we be doing? Is there advantages to changing the size of schools? So will you make that a part of this? We heard that, okay? And then finally we heard a great deal from we're growing. We're growing. We have some large schools. We have some overcrowded schools. We need some new schools. And clearly, I'm just going to go out and say it, you know, the Crofton folks were organized and there and out there, and we often see that kind of thing. You're going to see the results of that here in a little bit. But we found out that there's a lot of areas of the county that have some needs, and we've tried to put that into this whole plan, and we're going to lay that out for you here in just a little bit. The next section that I want to talk about is you asked for when you brought us in for this time around. You said school size is an issue, and so would you look at that for us? Would you really do some research on school size and what's being said around the country, and compare that to what's going on in Anne Arundel County? So we did that, and this just lists the kind of the review of literature, the studies that we looked at in depth, and we tried to find some of the most recent data, some of the most recent studies that are available on school size that would be appropriate for Anne Arundel School District, for your size school district, for public schools in general, and for all of those kinds of things. So the first 4 you see listed on there, those are all either from 2013 to 2015, and there's detail in the report about each of those and what each of those said, okay? We also looked real closely at one that's a little older, but that's the evaluation of the Gates Foundation high schools. Because if you remember back, the Gates Foundation gave grants, and they put grants out for specifically for creating small high schools. And their desired size high school was 400, and they wouldn't give a grant for anything over 600. You know, maybe that's not relevant to Anne Arundel County. I mean, maybe it is, but we thought there's been so much talk about that, and what were the results of that? We wanted to include that, even though that goes back to 2006. And then we really wanted to look at the Maryland Equity Project, because there's a lot of good information there about specifically for Maryland. And we had, through the first half of this, we had the interim report, and by the time we were done, we had the final report. So we got to be able to see that and make some comparisons with that. The detail of each of these is in there. What did we find? What did we find? First off, when you look at, I love this kind of stuff, but when you look at all the reports, the first I think we need as an education community around the United States to define what small and large really means, because they were all over the map. They were, you know, in one study, a small high school was 300. It's not listed here because it was too old, but I couldn't help myself. And it was out of Texas, of all places, but from, I think it was Texas A&M University, that said that the ideal high school size is 300. There's others that say the ideal high school size is 1,600. There's a lot of them kind of in between that show that, okay? In total, the bulk of the studies do say that there's an advantage to smaller schools in both academic achievement and student behavior. That academic achievement, and not always in all areas. Some studies would find that, well, the STEM areas, the science, technology, and engineering and mathematics was really improved with smaller schools, but some other areas might not have been. Language arts might not have been. Student behavior seemed to be improved with smaller schools, and again, we don't really know the definition of that. The other side of this slide, I think, is very important, and that throughout those studies, that it really depended on when they would find schools that they said that they could point to and say, yeah, there's the academic achievement and student behavior is better in the school, but a lot of times it had to do with the leadership structure in that school. It had to do with what the program offerings are in that school. It had to do with what the extracurricular offerings are in that school. So therefore, we've really school size is a factor, and it is a factor, and it is a factor that should be considered, but it's one factor among many that lead to student achievement, okay? And this one was out of the state of North Carolina, where they did a really detailed, I thought it was done by the State Department of Education in North Carolina, where they did a real detailed analysis of their different size schools. And they ended up saying that there is an advantage to smaller schools. But they were pragmatic about it and said, but it may not be great enough to advocate for widespread school construction, because they didn't have a lot of money in North Carolina when this study was done. And so does this overcome some other things? So it really leads us to some decisions and some recommendations. We ended up, because this was a key component of this, we ended up with wanting to say, here's what the recommendations are as we put together the master plan, and as we get into the detail of this master plan and lay it out for Anne Arundel County. We need to have a policy, and we believe, and we're recommending that you as a board adopt a policy regarding school size to set direction. Here's what we've used in the study and the results that we're going to give you today, okay? That says preferred school size, okay? That doesn't say build them at this number, okay? You may want to build them smaller than that, and this is the preferred school size. The preferred school size in Anne Arundel County, we say high schools at 1,600, middle schools at 1,200, and elementaries at 600. Now, when I compare that with what the Maryland Equity Project, because it came out with what it thought is the preferred school sizes in the state of Maryland, okay? It had 1,700 for high school, we're saying 1,600. It had 900 for middle school, and we're saying 1,200, a little bigger. It had 700 for elementary, and we're saying 600, okay? It's not that we just want to disagree with the Maryland Equity Project. We think those numbers fit the Anne Arundel School District. You know, it's very important to people in this district, we heard it over and over again, that we don't want to have split elementary, split middle schools. We don't want to have half the students from a middle school go to one high school and half to another. We really like the regular, what's the word I'm thinking of here? The regular feeder pattern, I'm sorry. The regular feeder pattern we really want to have, and that's important to us. Now, to the degree that you can, we think those numbers really work better for Anne Arundel County and for your number of schools and the number of schools that we're proposing when we get into this. Please don't go away saying that MGT said this is the size school to build, because it's not necessarily. You might want to build some high schools of 1,200 if that's the right number and the feeder patterns work right, and we'll show that as we get into this. But as a guide, as a guideline, we think those are good numbers, okay? Then if you adopt this policy, we really think that this policy needs to be a factor in determining these priorities. So therefore, we kind of got a little bit of a catch-22 there, in that we said, so we developed the priorities we gave you based on those sizes right there. Needs to be implemented on an ongoing basis. We're not going to snap our fingers and make schools of 1,600, 1,200, and 600 in Anne Arundel County School next week, okay? And we all understand that's not going to happen. It's not even going to happen next year. But you can certainly head that direction over the course of a 10-year plan, and so therefore the 10-year plan should head you in that direction. It's what I always say is great about a master plan, is that we're here today, we know we want to be over there in 10 years, so let's go that way, let's not head off this way to start with, and so it can head you in that direction, okay? We think high school size reduction should be one of the priorities as you implement this. Your high schools are large. Everybody knows that. And you're not going to solve that problem. If it is a problem, we're not going to solve it in a day or two, but you can head that direction. It should be a priority. And then finally, I have to say, monitor the progress of the proposed state small schools grant, because when you read the Maryland Equity Project, it has the recommendations for school size, and it has a recommendation that the state implement a plan for helping districts. Now, I don't know, when I look right now at the detail of that, I don't know that Anne Arundel's ever going to qualify for any, but I still have to say, keep monitoring it. keep lobbying when you have the opportunity to do that, because it looks like your state is going to be headed towards trying to assist school districts with implementing this, okay? And so you should keep that up as we go, okay? I'm going to give it back to Dodds, who's now going to take you through, I like to say, all the boring stuff now, all this detail about conditions and number of kids and capacities, but all that stuff that's really important, and then I'll come back when we get into here's how we put all this together and what it looks like. So, Dodds.
Thank you. No, if we're going to have data-driven decisions, we need data, and so let's talk about some of the data. You know, but I do want to comment and thank the public school staff. We work closely with them in collecting a lot of this data and generating a lot of it, and as they were in 2006, they were very energetic, very cooperative to work with us, and very professional. So I want to thank them. I want to start talking about demographics. You know, it's if you're making a plan for the future, it's wise to know what the demographics of your county is going to look like in the future, and we start by looking at kind of the broad demographics. And one of the key sources of our data is the census, and we looked at census data, and it showed that the live births in the county were projected to decrease. Oh, thank you, Ed. Going forward. And it also showed that the elementary school age children were kind of projected to decrease in the county based on census data. And then one of the other data elements that we had was that your capture rate as a district of the children who are born in the county, and then how many of those children end up in kindergarten, the capture rate, is less than 100%, which indicates that some children born in the county are either going to school out of the system or migrating out of the county. So based on that data, you know, you're going to dry up and blow away in 10 years. No. I mean, so it's important to look at other data as well, and we worked with county planners and looked at historical enrollments, and it's just a known fact, if you will, and general consensus that the county is going to continue to grow. There's going to be more immigration of people. There's going to be, as the economy picks up, there's going to be additional building going on. So using the district's cohort survival method, and then looking at housing starts that are projected to happen in the county, we updated from the 2006 study, we updated the student per household ratios, and actually made those numbers a little bit more granular, so we could look at different communities and how different types of housing produce different numbers of students and that sort of thing. And then the district, using a cohort survival method, projected the enrollments for the next 10 years. And those enrollments show that you're going to increase slightly overall as a district. You're currently at about, well, I guess you opened up a little bit over 80,000. We used the October 2014 enrollment, so at about 79,000, and then in 10 years you'll be, we're projecting an enrollment of 86,500 district-wide. That's all K-12 students. So that's a little less than a 7% increase over the next 10 years. At the elementary school level, it's going to be pretty steady. It'd go from about 37,100 to about 37,600, or 37,600. Middle school, 17,217 now. It's going to grow to about 19,200. And then the high schools is where we'll see a significant increase from about 22,000 now, projected to be about 26,500 in 2025. So as we start off, you'll see some ups and downs, it looks like, but then a general incline increase in student population as you go forward. And the detailed breakouts of all the projections by school are in the report. The next data element I'd like to talk about are the facility assessments. And there were 4 assessments of the facilities done: building condition, educational suitability, site condition, and technology readiness. Now, each one of those resulted in a score on a 100-point scale. So you might have a building that has a building condition score of 80 and an educational suitability score of 75, and so on and so forth. So to help the reader and staff understand and help rate and prioritize school needs, we create a combined score where we weight the building condition scores 55%, the educational suitability score 35%, and then the site and technology scores 5% respectively, so that we get a combined score for each school. So we kind of get an overall picture of the condition of that school. And then you could see by this key that it's much like reading the grades that your child brings home. 90 and above is excellent, or like new in the building. 80 to 89 is considered good. 70 to 79 fair. 60 to 69 poor, and then below 60 unsatisfactory. And that's when we really start questioning the long-term viability of a building when we see those kinds of scores. The first assessment, the building condition assessment, this was data gathered by the district staff based on their knowledge of the buildings, and looks at the condition, the physical condition of the buildings. Do the roofs leaks? Are the HVAC systems working well? The floors worn? That sort of thing. And as you can see, we had quite a range of scores from at the elementary schools from 58 up to 100. 100 reflects the new or renovated schools, obviously. Middle schools range from 64 to 96, and the high schools from 60 to 100. I think the headline here is that when you look at the overall average of your physical condition of your schools, they're in the high 90s or the 80s, which is in that good range. And so I think the results of 10 years of paying attention to your school buildings has paid off for the district. The next assessment we'll talk about is the educational suitability. And so as Ed mentioned, we look at the educational program, we look at the facility implications of that program, and then we go out and assess the buildings against those standards that we derive. So we're looking at things like, are the classrooms the appropriate size? Are the science rooms the appropriate size? Do those classrooms have the appropriate equipment in them? Are they located in the best place with regard to other classes? What's the overall environment of the school like? What's it look like on the outside when kids are delivered in the morning or when they're picked up in the afternoon? Is it vehicular pedestrian chaos, or is it orderly and well managed and safe? So we look at all of those kinds of things. And again, we had quite a range in schools, but again, we a little bit lower than the building condition scores. But a lot of the elementary schools were in that good range. I think one of the factors here was that you had numerous schools built in the 70s under the open school model, and since then you've gone in to some of them. You still have some of them in that open plan, but you've gone in and added walls into some of those into buildings, and well-intentioned. But it's putting walls in a building designed for an open school plan is kind of like putting a cube in an egg. It just doesn't fit. I mean, it's just not efficient, and so those aren't always the best solutions. And then the plans that are still open are hard acoustically, to perform in. So I think that was one of the major things we found in the suitability of the schools. Site condition, again, looking at the condition of the roads or the driveways, the sidewalks, the fields, and that sort of thing. Again, I think pretty good scores in the 80s, in the good range. I don't remember any overall issues there. And then technology readiness, looking at the building infrastructure that supports technology. So do you have sufficient air conditioning in your computer labs? You have sufficient electrical outlets for the computers and Wi-Fi drops? Do you have a sufficient phone system to communicate back and forth to teachers? So again, we had quite a range of scores there, and on the average, a little lower than the other categories. So it indicates we have a little work to do in that area. So when we take those 4 assessments and put them together in the combined scores and the weighting that I mentioned earlier, then we can see that we have overall a combined score that's pretty good. It's in at high 70s to the 80s. So we have room for improvement, but we're in overall pretty good shape. We have some schools that need more attention than others, and those will pop up as kind of the priority 1 schools that we need to address in the 10-year plan. This chart shows you kind of how the schools scored based on different grade levels. So we've got 24 schools that scored in above 90 or in that excellent like new range. We've got 47 schools in the good range. That's great. Of 38 schools in the fair, those are schools that need some attention. And we've got 10 schools in the poor range. They need a little more attention. The good news is we don't have any schools in that red line down below in the unsatisfactory range. So we take, as I mentioned earlier, the enrollment projections that we've done, looking at enrollments out for the next 10 years. We take that and align it with the capacity of the schools, and we come up with a utilization factor. And as you can see at the top of this chart, we've kind of marked that something over 110% utilization is inadequate. 101 to 110 is approaching inadequate. 85 to 109 is adequate utilization. So that's that range where we would like to be, and that gives us efficient use of the building of our facilities, but still gives us some room for enrollments when they increase or fluctuate. And then below 85, we're starting to get inefficient, and then below 75, we kind of consider that inefficient use of utilization. So this is just a chart as a sample of some schools, and as you can see, we've got the first column is the school name, the second column is the state-rated capacity for those schools. Third column is their 2014 FTE or enrollment. Then the next column is the 2024 state-rated capacity or projected capacity. Typically, that will be the same as the capacity now, unless a school is slated for. We were pretty sure that it was going to have some additions to address some of the overutilization now. So there will be cases where that capacity, that state-rated capacity changes. And then the projected enrollments. And then the last 2 columns show you the current and projected utilization based on the key, the color-coded are based on the key above. And then this chart kind of takes a more global view. So currently your elementary schools are being utilized at about 91%. That's pretty much right on target, and then it looks like over the next 10 years that's going to maintain consistent. Middle schools are now about 73%, so you've got a little room to grow there, but you're gonna grow, and you're gonna be up in the 80% utilization range in 10 years. And then high schools are now at about 88%, and it's projected that they're gonna go up to 106% overall utilization, with some of those schools over that 106%, obviously. So these are averages. Even though your elementary school's average is 91%, you do have some schools that are underutilized, and you do have some that are overcrowded, and the individual utilization rates are obviously all in the report. I'm going to give it back to Ed to kind of talk about the prioritization process and the final recommendations.
Okay. So as Dodd said, we take all these pieces of information, bring that together into a combined score. Now, how do we prioritize? How do we come up with what are the highest priorities? And Dodd's indicated that in a lot of the areas, you should feel really good, and I think you do. And Alex should feel really good, and your community should feel really good, because your scores, compared to a lot of school districts, we do this in school districts all over the country, your scores on average are pretty good. Okay, having said that, remember, you had 10 schools that scored in the poor category when you add all that up, okay? We better look at those, and that should be a priority. So we looked at really a three-prong priority for how we would prioritize the 10-year plan for Anne Arundel County schools. Well, one of them is those schools that scored low. Let's fix those up. Remember everything we said, it's all data-driven, okay? The second piece of that prong is, where are we overcrowded? Where are we going to, we need to deal with schools that are going to be over, either are or are projected to be over 110% of utilization. There's all kinds of problems that come with that, and we all know what those issues are. The third prong in Anne Arundel County is, how do we move toward? We came earlier on, I think it's chapter 3, we said, put a policy in place for what school size you want to head toward. Well, how do we move toward that? So there was three prongs that we said that we really want to look at, and how do we get there, okay? So prioritization, we looked at, and I started to say we looked at a whole bunch of different ways that we can make these cut points, okay? But we said, okay, if it's a combined score of less than 75, if you remember, when it gets into the 60s, it's poor. The 70s is that kind of, a satisfactory range, but the lower 70s, we probably should be looking at those and making some changes to those within a 10-year master plan, okay? Where's the projected utilization over 110%? Okay, where are we going to have overcrowded schools? Let's deal with that, okay? And then, where do we need new schools in order to provide solutions to overcrowding, accommodate projected development, and really start to move us toward smaller schools, if that is a goal, to be able to move toward that. So that's those three prongs we're talking about that we dealt with. So we laid that out, and I'm hesitating because the next slide is going to show you the list. It's going to show you schools, and it's going to show you here's what our recommendations are. Okay, and so I really want to lead into that. When you look at that, we think this addresses those three things. Now, for those of you that remember our plan from 10 years ago, we gave you a phase 1, a phase 2, and phase 3. We've done that again, but the whole 10-year plan is in phase 1. Because when we laid this out, when we made the cut points there, we think it's a reasonable total amount to lay that out over 10 years. So now these phase 1s aren't going to happen all in 1 year. And we do have it, and in your report it's laid out as to here's what is in year 1 of the plan, year 2, year 3, here's how much it costs for each of those years, and lays it out all the way. But these three things we think really it's phase 1 and it's the facility master plan. And now we're going to make it more complicated because there's a phase 1 and a phase 1A, but bear with me, I'll explain that to you as we go through. So phase 1. Let's take a look at the things that we've said should be on phase 1. Well, schools that scored less than 65. Well, there you go. And you know, it's dangerous, but we do it anyway, even though it's dangerous, to list schools by their exact number because, oh, my schools, you know, if a school scored 62.59 or 63.31 or 64.06, they all need attention. And there isn't any one of them that's more important than another one. They all score in that below 65 range, and they need to be addressed. Okay? We've put those down as replacement budget. And you know, I think that on those first ones on there, that's likely what you will do is replace those facilities when they get to that level. But this is a high-level master plan. Alex and his people have to now dig in. There may be pieces. There may be a gym that you do want to save from one of those, and you design around that. There may be. So I want you to understand this is a high level. But I'd rather give you the replacement budget and then find out that, ooh, we can do this for a little less, than to give you a less budget and then you get mad at me and say, hold it, that wasn't enough money. And so I'd rather go that route. So that's the budget for replacing it. They're going to do a lot of study on what you do for each of these if this plan gets adopted. But there's the list of schools. You'll see in there right away, we've put in 2 new high schools. We've put in a new high school for Crofton. You know what? As I said earlier, I was going to come back to it. We heard from that community loud and clear. When we looked at the data, and we give you a data-driven plan, they're right. They're right. You ought to have a high school in that part of the county, and so we've put it in there, and we've said that's it, and that's a big number, but that's what new high schools cost. Okay, and so we put that in there, and we think that you should be looking at that. That helps then toward I'm going to get into you're going to have to make boundary adjustments on a regular basis, especially as you do new schools. And I've put that in here, but that helps you with being able to solve overcrowding in some facilities and start this move towards some smaller schools. So it helps you to do that. We also think you're going to need to replace Old Mill. And we think you start with Old Mill West, and in the detail in your plan, it shows you what we think is probably going to be the boundaries around that, because we think there's going to be an Old Mill West and there's an Old Mill. What's the other one's east? West. I wasn't sure if it was because we got a middle school going north and south, and a high school going east and west. And you're a big school district. This gets complicated, but you know that very well. So we think we start with that one, and you'll see that on the maps when you look at that. Then we see some. Now we still said replacement on Rippling Woods, even though it's a little. We almost always say under 65. You really should look at replacing that building, because you're more often than not your money ahead to replace it rather than renovate it. With those caveats that I said earlier. When you get over 65, we say you might want to look at that, but Rippling Woods, it sits in the flight pattern and that kind of thing, and so you may want to replace that one as well. You're going to, as you get further down the list and the numbers get a little higher, then you'll see where that gets a little bit different. That's this continues on. It says continued on the next slide. So when you continue this on, you'll see that all of those, there is what we see as the phase 1 and all of the schools that fit that phase 1, that is schools that are under 65 and or projected at over 110% capacity, with the exception, and this comes to $910 million over a 10-year period. Okay, that's when you look at what you've spent in the past 10 years, that comes to $910 million over a 10-year period. This one doesn't count in the inflation and every year thing, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But now it's the phase 1A, because I promised I was going to confuse you all that I could here. And the phase 1A, these don't have dollar signs with them, but this is how you address over time the schools that are over 110% capacity, but we're not recommending that you replace that school or that you renovate that school or you do an addition onto that school, because their numbers were high enough. South River High School, you don't need to replace South River High School. You don't need to do an addition to it. You need to redistrict it with Southern High School. That's what you need to do. And so that's how you can solve. So this is how you solve those. A lot of this redistricting is with some of the new schools that we're talking about you building. So once again, I want to emphasize again, you're not going to do all this redistricting next year. You're going to do this. This is going to be a 10-year process. But if your goal is smaller schools, your goal is to solve these problems, okay? And I know, and superintendents sometimes get real mad at me because changing boundaries is always a difficult thing to do, and it's always a difficult political thing to do. So, Dr. Arlotto, I'm sorry, but you're going to be doing it for the next 10 years if you're going to meet these goals. And so blame me. But when you're out there, he's shaking his head like, yeah, I will. But it's okay, because if you're gonna meet these goals, you're probably gonna be doing those. We're going to have some recommendations here. Let people know well ahead of time. Have the 10-year plan out there and know where you're headed. But if you're going to meet the goals of smaller schools, you're going to do some redistricting. If you're going to build new schools, you're going to do some redistricting. And so it's going to become kind of a way of life as you move through this process. Okay? If you want to see as I said, phase 1 is those ones. We do have in the report a phase 2 and a phase 3. That's for informational purposes. We're not recommending those schools be included in this 10-year plan. Phase 2 are the schools that scored below 80, greater than 75, below 80. So they're kind of the ones next on the list. If you want to be able, people say, how come my school's not there? Well, it scored right here and it's next on the list, okay? The phase 3 is all the other schools and where they scored, and so you have those. We think those are quite a ways down the line, but if you can, and you want to keep up the maintenance and all those kinds of things. The by year for each of this is listed on page 108, Exhibit 10.6 of your report. The by year, it's just too long and complicated to show on a slide that anybody could read here, but you have that, and the total comes to just over $1.3 billion over the 10-year period when you add it up by year with the inflationary factor put in as well. So that's where we are with that, okay? I'm going to keep going here and just that is the master plan. That is the schools that are on the master plan. That is and as I say, you have how that's laid out over a 10-year period. There's the dollars that we're showing with that, and you'll be able to see each school by year. We have some supporting recommendations. We always do, okay? And the first one is that you implement the non-instructional facility improvements in conjunction with the 10-year plan, and we've listed them there. There's a list of some non-instructional facilities, some of your support facilities, some of your maintenance facilities, some of your warehouse facilities. We think there's some needs there, and we've listed those out, and we've incorporated those dollars into the 10-year plan as well, and shown where those fall on the 10-year plan. So you need to implement those as well. Okay. Again, monitor the proposed competitive grant program to support the construction of small schools or renovation of large school buildings. The state of Maryland and the Maryland Equity Report says the state's going to do that. Right now, the rules, Anne Arundel probably wouldn't qualify under the current rules for access to those grants, but keep monitoring that and maybe keep lobbying that. Okay. Annually review boundary adjustments. I know that's an awful one to say, and I'm a former superintendent myself, and I'd throw things at somebody that said that, but you're going to have to. In order to meet the goals that you've laid out, you're going to have to annually, okay? Regularly update the educational specifications for these. Programs keep changing. We've based this on, and we assessed them based on your programs. Your programs over the next 10 years will change. So you want to annually do that. You've done a good job of that in the past. You've kept your ed specs up to date, but keep doing that, okay? Continue to update those long-range enrollment projections, okay? And the last one's the shortest one on there, but maybe the most critical, is communicate. Let people know what's coming when, so they understand, because there is going to be changes occur over a 10-year period. And while it's difficult for people, it's a lot less difficult when you understand the reason, you understand when it's coming, and you prepare for it. And so that makes it an awful lot easier to deal with, and you would have that over time. So that's kind of that's it. There's what we did and what our recommendations are. And thank you so much for allowing us to come back. Thank you for we're you know, I know I start rambling on, but Alex said early on that he brings in you bring in a company like ours because we're a disinterested third party. And no offense to Alex, and I enjoy working with Alex a great deal. You guys have one of the best there is, but we're not disinterested. We're from outside of Anne Arundel County. No question about that. But everybody in our firm, we hire our people because we have a passion for education. And I take pride in watching things get better for kids in school districts around the country, and I get a lot of pride in that. So I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of that in Anne Arundel. Where we're disinterested is that I don't care if the student's in the north end of the county or the south end of the county or the middle part of the county. We want to address the needs based on the data for all of the kids throughout the county, and that's what we hope we've done. Once you've hired us, you're stuck with us, so if you have questions, please contact us. We'll come back and talk to you more. We'll further explain things if that needs to happen, and thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of this.
Thank you.
And thank you for the presentation, Madam President. I believe we have some guests here in the audience that would like to address the board before we engage in further question and answers or dialogue.
Okay.
Should we go? Should we move back?
Councilman Walker.
Dr. Arlotto, Madam President, Madam Vice President, thank you for having us this morning. Most of all, thank you for moving forward with the MGT study. I especially want to say thank you for including the legislative branch of government in this process and recognizing us as a stakeholder in the process. When we started this process a few months ago, I sat right here and committed publicly to wait for the results of the study and to support its recommendations regardless of the outcomes. I made this commitment because it represents a third-party objective opinion, as was just stated, of our infrastructure, focused on our children, our school system, and the most efficient use of our county taxpayer dollars. While I've not had the opportunity to study the whole document, I'm thrilled that a new and long-awaited high school is slated for our community of Crofton. Mr. Shaknovich already mentioned that this was not about lobbying efforts, but about a third-party objective opinion, as you know. While I've been down here lobbying for a Crofton High School for the past 4.5 years, the real credit goes to the community of Crofton, who for the last 40 years has waited patiently, lobbied, phone called, emailed, and showed up here at the council and at the BOE in their purple shirts. I especially want to say a huge thank you to Jonathan Boniface for his relentless dedication and persistence in the Build Crofton High School movement. He's here today joined by his wife Rebecca and other faithful volunteers Shannon Highland, Marissa Holden, and Christy Bruner. They've organized community meetings, sent out emails, set up a Facebook page, and used their own money to buy t-shirts and bumper stickers. Congrats to them and the community of Crofton. I look forward to seeing Dr. Arlotto's capital budget, and I'm hopeful that this important project will be included when it's unveiled later today. My only request is to make sure that the Crofton High School is built to accommodate all the current students of Crofton and also account for growth. I'll end by saying thank you to the board again for moving forward with this study and for including the legislative branch of government in this process. We are all partners in the process of providing, as Dr. Arlotto said, a truly awesome school system. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam President, Madam Vice President, members of the board, Superintendent Arlotto. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. This is a great day for Anne Arundel County. This study confirms what many residents and educators have known for years, that a Crofton High School needs to become a reality. The old mill complex needs to be broken up, and we need to move towards smaller neighborhood schools. I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of everyone involved, especially Ed Humble and Dodds Cromwell of MGT of America, Alex Shaknovich, our school construction genius, and Superintendent George Arlotto, who continues to be a critical partner in and the indispensable leader of our county's educational progress. During this process, both the school system and the administration have made a concerted effort to work together, and this MGT study is a reflection of that spirit of cooperation. This study is not just a blueprint for school construction in our county for the next decade, but more importantly is an example of a process that is a model for the rest of our state. In Anne Arundel County, we do not determine school construction projects based on whose district they are in or who supports them, but rather through an unbiased and scientific formula based on demonstrated need across our county. By undergoing a study like this, we're able to take politics out of the process and put forth a plan based on thoughtful study and science. Even more exciting, this study is an example of what can happen when all sides come together: the county administration, including our ACE educational officer and former board member, Emily Brandenburg, the county council, the school board, and the superintendent to create a better future for our children. Today is the first day of a new era of school construction in this county. I'm honored to be part of it, and I thank you for this opportunity to be part of the many groundbreakings that will follow on the heels of this report. And I also just want to mention, as an aside, I was just looking at the big chart of all the projects that are being recommended over the next 10 years, including Severna Park High School. There are 6 high school projects on that chart for the next 10 years, including 3 renovations and 3 completely new high schools. I don't believe there has ever been a time in Anne Arundel County history where a school board or the county administration has ever been willing and able to undertake a construction program of that magnitude. And if you would like to go forward, I just want to assure you that you will have the full support of my administration, and I'm so excited to be working with you on this important project. This next 10 years is an opportunity to completely change the nature of the educational system of this county, and I look forward to working with you to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Dr. Frank?
I'd like to thank the folks from MGT. I hope they're still sitting in the background there. I'd like to say to you folks and to everyone in the audience with an engineering background, I hope you appreciate some of the things that they said. They said that they're going to make an independent, outside, rational, data-driven determination. I live in Crofton. Sure, I'd love to have a new high school, but let's see what the data shows. Thank you very much for the study. Dr. Arlato, will the public have an opportunity to see this study?
Yes, sir. As soon as it was released this morning, the button was pushing. It's up on the website now for the public to access.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I had a question related to the demographics. When we did the study 10 years ago, we had all the angst of BRAC and what was going to be happening and so forth like that. So I know that may have skewed some of our numbers because we were guesstimating. You know, I mean, we did, I think, pretty well. So how close were we with the numbers that we did then, and how comfortable do we feel with the numbers that they provided now?
I think we came very close. At that time, BRAC did in fact materialize as we had predicted or projected back then. It took a little bit longer, so it did unfold. It unfolded much as we expected. It just took a little bit longer, partially because of the logistics of doing such a big undertaking, as well as some of the economic downturn possibly slowed some of that down. But with respect to the report that's before you that will guide us for the next 10 years going forward, I'm very confident in it. MGT took a tremendous amount of due diligence and not just relied on data that the school system provides, but reached out to the county planning and zoning and demographers, the Maryland State Department of Planning, Health Department data, Census Department data. So they receive input from many, many, many sources that work together and help reinforce the projections that are put forward. So I have a high degree of confidence that they will serve us well in the next 10 years.
Oh, that's great, because that's always seems to be a sticking point. People never seem to believe that we have more people here, we have less people here. And some of the problem we had too was where we did not anticipate growth, but they had built some communities that were 55 and older, and then the people in those established communities moved into those 55 and older, and younger people moved in, which was a little bit of some unanticipated growth in certain areas, which kind of
right. Much of that growth, Ms. Virtue, was tied to the economic downturn
right.
that forced some families to make decisions that they may have not otherwise made in the early to mid 2000s. So that changed the dynamic, but as good as we are, even the Federal Reserve Board didn't fully predict the economic or the extent of the economic downturn or ramifications. So
no, I know, and that I mean, it impacted us in many ways. So it's very good to know that. And I also went through and was checking off, and so all the projects that were on the original MGT study that are now percolating up to the top, those that have waited patiently their turn, if you will, they're still all in the high priority list. They haven't dropped off. If I've looked at it, I've ticked them all off. And so the way that they presented this list, so maybe the question is, and the list that they presented us, is the recommendation is that these are the top schools and they just went by their scores. That doesn't say we have to do this one first or this one second. Is that right? I mean, I know that we normally
it
try
is
to
both.
do that.
It is both. It is clearly it's a demonstration of need, so it is in rank order in terms of the demonstration of need. The capital budget ultimately is the superintendents to recommend and the boards to accept, alter, or reject. So it will be your capital budget ultimately, but much as the initial study informed and shaped the CIP that we used for the last 9 years, it would be certainly staff's recommendation that we use this to inform and shape the CIP going forward.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just looking, and all these schools are still on there, so that's
Yes, ma'am.
good.
Mr. Webb.
Mr. Saknovich, I'm looking at the enrollment projections. The study is showing a 7% increase over the next 10 years. I'm just wondering, they did mention the projected live birth rate to go down. Was immigration considered in those figures?
Yes, and again, I think what they spoke to is while the birth rate is declining here in the county statistically, and certainly some of the youngsters that are born do go to private school or do move out, there's factors that work against that decline, i.e. we gain students by folks moving into the county, either through new development or buying homes or emigrating into this county from elsewhere. So all of those various factors, some cause projections to go down, some cause projections to go up. In aggregate, taking all those, and I just named a few, but taking all of those many, many, many different data points into account, we are a school district that's growing. We are one of the fastest, at least by percentage, growing school districts here in the state of Maryland, thankfully. I think partly because Anne Arundel is such a wonderful place to live and we have such a terrific school district that we continue to attract and retain families here in Anne Arundel County. But we will continue to grow as the data demonstrates, and there's far more detail in the actual report to back up those numbers. But we will grow from the almost 81,000 that we have currently up to about 86,500 by the end of this 10-year planning time, the 2024-2025 school year.
Will the board be seeing the full report at some point in time?
The full report is already up online. It's available both on board docs. It's available on our AACPS website.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Birch.
So going back to Ms. Ritchie's question about whether or not the list could or would be changed, I guess my thought is the report and the recommendations are based on an assumption that we are adopting a policy recommendation based on questions that we asked in the report that we haven't necessarily determined that we're going to do, which is a certain high school size. This board, as far as I know, has not yet made a decision that that is what we want to follow. We may very well do that, but I don't think that it's a given that we have as a board said 1,600 students is the appropriate size for our county. And so I think that's important for us to realize as we're looking at this, that it's not a given that what they said in their recommendation from their research is what we think is appropriate. I mean, I know that when Mrs. Brandenburg was on the board, she frequently said that our high schools are the appropriate size for school districts of our size, that it's very appropriate to have between 1,600 and 2,400 students in a high school when you're about an 80,000 student school district, and that it works very well for school districts our size. So it's just something we need to take into consideration. When you're a school district our size, what works best for us? So I think we don't need to look at it as a given. We need to decide what our policies are going to be before we make our final decisions. And once we decide what the list is going to be, then we stick to the list. And I think that's what the public needs to know, is that once the list is decided, then we're not going to vary, because we're not going to play politics once the list comes to fruition. We're not going to play games with how it goes. But we're going to decide it based on what we think is best for our district, not who made the who called me and talked to me the most about it. That's not going to be what we're based on. We're going to base it on what we think is best for our district. But again, that was just something that we asked to be considered in the study. It's not something that we said, once they tell us what the number is, we're going with it. So I think that needs to be considered. And I would have loved, I'm glad the public is able to see the report right now. I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
Mr. Webb?
Mr. Shachnovich, can I assume that we made, regarding size, that we made a apples-to-apples comparison when looking at these other districts, that they were high schools that were 9th through 12th, and we weren't comparing to 10 through 12 high school or 8 through 12 high school, but everything was on the same level, 9 through 12?
Again, there was, well, the research reports that were reviewed are listed there in the exhibit, and certainly they're elaborated upon much further in the finished product, the full report that goes on for triple digits numbers of pages. But the answer is yes. So taking a look at research that speaks to best practices, that speaks to districts that are of our size, comparably situated, all of that was taken into consideration.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of questions. One thing I wanted just to help clarify for the public on the site type, where it says countywide schools and other facilities, could you just share, as a countywide school, our special education facilities?
Yes, ma'am. Our CAT centers are special education facilities. Our regional schools, such as a Phoenix Center that has a countywide attendance boundary.
And then the other facilities would be like our Arlington Echo Studio 39?
It could also be water towers, sewage treatment plants, warehouses, things that are not classically a true traditional elementary school or true traditional middle school.
Okay.
And again, they are broken down in great detail by name, by site, by location within the context of the full many-page report.
I also just the enrollment projections to say that it's going to take us 10 years to get to 86,568 students sounds conservative to me, since we've grown, what, about 2,000 students perhaps. Well, we won't have the official numbers till later, but if we kept going, if we're hovering around 81,000 this year, is it really going to take 10 years to get to 86.5?
Well, again, this is taken, I mean, this is a statistical analysis that's undertaken, taking a look at how many developable lots we have, what the current zoning we have in place, what the county's 10-year growth and development plan has in place, et cetera. Much as I answered to Ms. Ritchie's comments earlier, if by hypothetical example, if the county completely redid their growth and development plan and doubled the zoning for every piece of property in the whole county, of course those numbers, don't hold. So they are projections to begin with, and they're projections using the best available information that we have at this point in time and the best knowledge that we have regarding how all of these various situations are going to evolve over time on a going forward basis, absent some very large or seminal shift in either policy or economy or general development, growth and growth planning and zoning, et cetera. So this comports with the state of Maryland has a growth and development plan. Anne Arundel County has a growth and development plan, and these projections comport with those plans that both of those entities have in place at this point in time, and again, on a going forward basis, to the best of our ability to predict.
My last two questions have to do with the Phase 1 10-year plan list. My first question is that the combined score of Old Mill High School replacement is 63.1, which would put it, if we were doing it mathematically, in order right after Tyler Heights. Instead, it's much further down on that first page list. I realize that it's a part of a large complex, but could you help explain why the 63.1 is down and not under Tyler Heights?
Certainly. So as you know, right now, by good fortune, the county government has allocated $500,000, and it was upon the recommendation of the county executive, and the county council concurred with that, to do a viability study of the Old Mill project. That money is in place in the current year, and that is underway. But the Old Mill campus is a very complex piece of property. As the board knows, the Old Mill complex has under one roof and a high school. Our current Old Mill High School has two middle schools, Old Mill Middle North, Old Mill Middle South, has an elementary school, which is Rippling Woods, and has a special education center, which is Ruth Eason. We also have two other very big complicating factors. One, we are in the MAA, the Maryland Aviation Authority's flight zone, the landing and takeoff zone, landing principally, heading into the BWI airport, and then BG&E has some high transmission power lines that go right through our Old Mill complex to serve a big section of the Northeast Seaboard Corridor, in fact. So it's a very complex piece of property, and it's a very complex project. And the analogy I use with everyone is essentially it is a multi-layer onion that we have to begin unpeeling one layer at a time. And so through the viability study, we're studying not just the property that we have at Old Mill, but we're also studying other properties that are in the adjacent or immediate area that are in the public ownership portfolio, be that Parks and Rec land, other county government-owned land, as well as some undeveloped privately owned parcels in the area to identify opportunities that we can utilize to build the schools. But this unlayering essentially would unfold in that we would be constructing a brand new, not presently existing Old Mill High School, likely off of the current campus as it exists today, and that is that Old Mill West High School. So that high school, once constructed, would have to have a catchment area created for it, and some of the students that currently attend Old Mill High School, as well as some of the surrounding areas, would begin occupying that new school. That would begin slowly lowering the bucket at Old Mill. We would also have to construct two new Old Mill High Schools, possibly one on the current campus, possibly one off of the current campus. And again, once those are constructed, we will be able to have those students transition into those new spaces. I should have maybe said at the outset that there are on the order of about 5,000 children currently between the high school and the two middle schools. There's almost 5,000 kids under one roof. We don't have a holding facility for 5,000 children. We can't relocate them off the premises, nor do we have enough land to simultaneously build all these structures. So it is going to have to be a phased approach where we're going to have to build a structure, move some children out, build some more structures, move some children out, and ultimately the last piece of that puzzle will be reconstructing and demolishing that final Old Mill, because we're going to need that Old Mill building to be the holding facility. Again, we can't relocate them to Chesapeake or to Annapolis Middle or to Southern, as we have successfully been able to do with some of our smaller elementary school projects. So we're going to have to continue to keep the existing facility in place for a period of time while we build those other assets, and over that period of time begin to move the youngsters into the new building. So it is not that we're saying that the 63.1 combined score school that you referenced previously, Ms. Korblack, is the lowest priority. It's simply a recognition of the logistical reality that that building will have to remain in its place as the final leg of this unlayering process that ultimately will allow us to reconstruct the entire complex and campus there.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question just has to do with the new schools that are on the list, since of course they don't have a combined score. The Crofton Area High School, Old Mill West High School are on the list together. And again, on the second page, the West County Area High School and Elementary School. Is this a priority order, or in an ideal world, would we be doing both high schools together at the same time? Or do we need to start Old Mill West before we start Crofton because of this peeling away of the onion of the Old Mill complex?
Well, again, ultimately that will be governed by the capital improvement budget that we're going to undertake, but it is essentially a recommended order of processing of execution of these projects. Remember that for both the Crofton High School project as well as the Old Mill project, we're currently undergoing those viability studies. The county government had allocated $350,000 to analyze the Crofton High School site and $500,000 to help us analyze the Old Mill High School site, again, as well as the adjacent areas. The Crofton site does not have a current building. You know that if we go about the process of reconstructing or demolishing or replacing, we have to do feasibility studies. So the logistics involved with Old Mill will certainly take longer. There's more approval processes that we're going to have to go through as well. So the Crofton project, given that it does not have a current building at that site, we're not going to have to go through the formal feasibility study. We won't have to go through weighing those 5 options, convincing the state what is the correct option, the renovation, replacement, modernization, revitalization, et cetera. So that project will certainly have a quicker execution window in order for us to be able to deliver that. Old Mill, as I said, is much more complex and has more regulatory hurdles that we're going to have to cross, as well as just given the size and sheer volume of space we're going to have to construct and fund, it's going to play out over a longer period of time. So it's not that one's easier, one's harder, one's more important, one's less important. It has to do with essentially the logistics of how you can go about in an organized fashion of funding and constructing these facilities.
And then I guess with Old Mill, this Old Mill West, you also have to buy land, potentially.
Potentially, again, that's what the viability study is taking a look at: land that the Board of Ed currently owns, any other land that's in the public domain, so it could be land owned by Rexon Park, it could be land owned by the county government for other purposes, and it's looking at privately owned land. So it's not a foregone conclusion that we're going to have to go through a property acquisition. We may have to work with the county government to deed land that may be in their portfolio over to the Board of Education so we can construct on it.
Thank you. Mrs. Birch.
2 questions. One is really quick. Schools like Mary Moss, if it was a land property we were leasing, that wasn't considered in the study. Is that correct?
Correct, because Mary Moss, as you know, we have relocated that
Right.
campus to J. Albert's. And,
But we wouldn't have considered the Crownsville because that would have been really low on the.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And I also wanted to clarify, when you were going through the process for Old Mill, at one point you said after we did the new West High School, then we would have to build the 2 new high schools. You meant 2 middle schools, right?
Two middle schools.
Okay,
yes.
I just wanted to make sure that.
And it's not after, so it's not going to be linear. It's not like we're going to be building
but
one. We're going
I
to
was
have,
just clarifying 2 middle schools, not 2 high schools.
It is. I apologize for that.
I just wanted to make sure because all of a sudden there was even another high school and it was confusing me.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I think you just alluded to it before. One of the things we were hoping to get some information, and I just kind of scrolled through, so I don't know if it's in the full report, was, where is land available? So is that in this report, or is that
because the county government has allocated the $500,000, so we do have a land inventory of everything that we already own that is available. And the county government has an inventory of land that they currently own by the various departments within the county government as well. Because the county government has allocated the $500,000 to study the land solution for that, we did not task
Okay.
MGT with
Okay.
doing that, since the county government is already collaborating with us to actually do that. We didn't want to pay twice for the exact same
No, that makes a
scope
lot of sense not to
services,
pay
so.
twice for the same thing. But I just was wondering, are we going to be able to see that? Because
Right, we
when that-
have an inventory of all the land we own. We have an inventory of all the land that the county government owns. And obviously, the first solution to everything is to use our land. The second solution to everything is to use land that is, again, in the public portfolio, but not under our direct control. The final last solution would be to acquire private or commercial property that nobody in the public sector currently owns.
Right, because some of the property that we own may not be suitable for putting anything on. It may not be large enough to put on, we may own a piece of property, but we'll hold an elementary school, but wouldn't hold a high school.
Correct. So we don't own any property. We currently don't have any property that's not buildable. Any property that is not buildable, we
just
have
got rid of
accessed over the years. But you're right. We have small sites that are only suitable to an elementary school. We have larger sites that are suitable to secondary schools.
Right. And then the other piece that I wanted to kind of go back to a little bit is the piece of redistricting. And it'll be really hard when we get into the redistricting for people to remember that they had a part in deciding what the goals were for our school system and what our plans were and what we wanted, what the community, the 700 and some odd people and the other 500 and some odd people who participated on the surveys, what they wanted for our school system. And I know that's a very small number considering we have 80 some odd thousand students, but to remember that, sometimes you get what you ask for. And redistricting is a part of that. And it's a part that other counties do on a regular basis. And nothing is written in stone and in terms of, when people move into communities and so forth like that. And that we've done a lot of work to ensure that all of our schools are schools that everybody wants to go to. I don't think we have any schools that I routinely get calls. I don't know how they find my number, but I get calls, and because it's hard to find on the website, but people will say, what school would you recommend? And I'd say any school. But if you're married to a school, make sure you move into the middle of the district. Don't move into the boundaries, because that the possibility of redistricting is very real.
Mr. Webb.
Mr. Shaknovich, just to clarify something, on the master plan recommended projects phase 1, as far as the total budget for the recommended projects, should I be adding columns for addition, renovate, and replace?
Yes, sir. So it's 1.1 billion.
So it's
with a B.
1.14 billion.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have any other board comments. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, thank you. Do we need to take a short break, Bob? No, okay. The next item on the agenda is the public comment portion of the meeting. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each, and the board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing the meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion, not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking, and handouts should be given to the board assistant. I do not have any completed cards. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? Okay, we'll move on to action items. Item 5.01, administrative personnel appointments. We have no recommendations for this meeting. Item 5.02, personnel. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend that the board approve the actions as stipulated on the attached sheets.
All those in favor? Motion passes 9-0-0. Item 5.03 is filling of the vacancies on the executive committee of the Countywide Citizen Advisory Committee. Mrs. Nally.
I move that the board appoint Helen Holly Stack to fill the vacancy for the Severna Park Cluster Elementary Schools representative on the county-wide Citizen Advisory Committee.
All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 5.04 is oh. No, they told us there was nothing. Yeah, 5.01 was not an action item, correct? Okay. We're fine.
In that case, information, it was not a promotion. Promotions will go to the board. This is a lateral move. Yes, ma'am.
5.04 is policy GAO, medical benefits for retirees. This is a third reading. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy GAO, subject to final correction for style and format.
Second.
Is there any board comment? Any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Nally abstained, so 801. Item 5.05 is policy GBA, executive staff. This is also a third reading. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy GBA, subject to final correction for style and format.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Item 5.06 is policy GAI, workdays and clement weather. This is also a third reading. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy GAI, subject to final correction for style and format.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. Then next item on the agenda is 5.07, the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2017 capital budget, 6-year plan, and state capital improvement plan. And we have a presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. For the record, Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer.
Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities.
And we're here to present item 5.07. It's an information-only item regarding the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2007 capital budget, as well as the 6-year and state capital improvement plan. As the board is well aware, we are required by state requirements to turn in our state capital improvement program this year by October 5th of 2015. By the very nature of the state cycle, the state budgetary process and cycle being out of phase with the county government. The state cycle begins in October with the mandated submission by each of the 24 LEAs and concludes in April when the General Assembly finishes their work for the fiscal year to craft their look-forward budget. Our local budgetary cycle here in Anne Arundel County requires us to conclude our deliberations by February so we can transmit our budget to the County Executive's Office. By March, the County Executive's Office has until mid-May to work on not just the Board of Education's budget as well as the other entities here within Anne Arundel County so that it can be remitted to the legislative branch at the County Council that by county charter must conclude their work by the 15th of June. So it is for that out of phase, out of cycle nature that we appear before you today as a requirement. It's important to know that this is a very complex matter that we are laying before you, and it is for that purpose that we've scheduled a workshop that will be held here in this room on the 15th of September at 6 p.m. It's certainly open to the public. It will provide an opportunity for the superintendent and staff to share details with the board and allow the board ample opportunity to interact with the superintendent and staff to gain further insight and clarity and get questions and rationale resolved at that time. However, the public is not able to participate in a testimony manner on the 15th. They will be afforded that opportunity on the next day. So on the 16th of September, the Board of Education will meet again here in this room, and as part of that budget process, the recommended capital improvement program from the superintendent will be before you as an action item, and a public hearing will be held at that time so that the public can weigh in on their commentary with respect to the budget. So by way of a very high-level background, let me give you a snapshot of the current fiscal year and the year ahead. So in the current fiscal year, which is FY16, the final approved recommendation, the recommended request from the Board of Education that went forward to the state and county government was for $163.1 million. Ultimately, $151.7 million was approved, separated as follows, with the state of Maryland contributing $36.4 million towards the 16 budget, and the county government contributing the balance, which was $115.3 million. Before you is a request as it relates to the FY17 budget, in which the superintendent is recommending that we ask for $159.9 million in total, split again as follows. The state of Maryland would be asked to contribute $54.3 million, and the county government would be asked to contribute $105.6 million. So if you allow me to orientate you through the next 4 pages of the exhibit, because I think just understanding the landscape and the layout of the exhibit would aid your review of it in the days ahead as we lead up to the workshop and prep you for questions that you may have or information that you may require. So the very first sheet of the exhibit is the FY17 capital budget. It's the official request that the board is making, and it's orientated as follows. So this is the superintendent's recommendation. The far left-hand column shows the FY17 priority order. The next column over to the right will show your FY16 priority as they currently exist. You'll see that some of the numbers are missing, and some of the numbers are missing because we have completed and paid off those projects. Many of you had the opportunity to join us, for example, at Lothian Elementary School, or will be joining us at Mills Parole Elementary School or at Crofton Elementary School shortly. So those projects, while in their final completion stages right now, have been fully paid for in terms of the amount of funding required to complete those projects. Therefore, they no longer exist on the sheet. So the numbers that are missing are all tied to projects that we've either completed or have all of the money required for. As you go further down the list, you'll see some projects that do not have numbers in them in a 16 column, and those are projects that did not exist in the FY16 year. It's the superintendent's recommendation that they be added now for the first time into the priority list. The third column is the requirement by title or by program name. It's important to remember that the capital budget is line item appropriated, and both the state and the county have complete and unilateral line item authority over each and every one of these. So we have to break them out in this very linear prescriptive fashion so that the decision makers on the appropriation side at the state and county government can make those funding decisions ultimately. The fourth column over is the superintendent's request for each individual line item, and finally the fifth column is the cumulative or running total as we go down the page, finally to the bottom, amassing to that $159.9 million. The next page of your exhibit has the information much the same, except, as I said earlier, here in the state of Maryland, we are very fortunate that the state of Maryland does in fact participate in, to a degree, to a portion, towards public school construction. And because of that, we do break our request up into how much are we specifically asking from local county government and how much are we specifically asking from the state. So as I said earlier, we are asking for approximately just under $105 million from the county government and 54 million some odd dollars from the state government. And this is the apportionment of those two, again, totaling up to the same bottom line. The second piece of the activity is a look forward. So a 6-year capital improvement plan. We are required to allow the funding, our publics and the funding authorities to be able to look forward 6 years into what our requests would be, what those funding obligations will be, and what is the sequence in which projects would be undertaken and the duration of those projects. So this basically shows you the 6-year plan, and it's divided into 2 halves. The top half are recurring projects. So these are projects we have each and every year. For example, our upgrades as they relate to ADA and accessibility, or our upgrades as they relate to vehicle purchases, et cetera. That's an ongoing, continuous need that the district has, and it shows the dollar values that we're asking for in each of the next 6 years, obviously in addition to the current FY year. The bottom half of the exhibit then shows those named projects, the larger scale projects that are not cyclical in nature. You'll see in the far left-hand column that a number of those have existing, and specifically I will point out Severna Park High School, and then Manorview, High Point, George Cromwell, Jessup, and Arnold Elementary Schools. Those were projects that we had already received funding for from the county in terms of either feasibility study or design monies. The feasibility studies had been completed for all of those, and both the county government and the state government had already had the opportunity to review and weigh in and approve those feasibility studies. And in fact, designs are underway for 4 of those 5 projects. Construction is currently active at Severna Park, if you've had the pleasure of going past that project. But for Manorview, High Point, George Cromwell, and Arnold, the designs are underway, and at your next board meeting, you will see the first phase of our design efforts for those. George Cromwell was not funded for designs for design in the current fiscal year, so we're asking for the design money for George Cromwell. But all of those projects, again, are in the order that you are accustomed to seeing those, because in the phraseology that I've used with many to explain, the train has already left in those projects, and they're either actively under construction, actively under design, or we've passed the approvals process to get those projects started, and certainly there is funding in place for all of those. So it is below Arnold then in your exhibit that you will see the recommendations of the superintendent each of the next 6 years, and they are correlated with the 10-year exhibit, the 10-year recommendations that were put forward by MGT in a presentation that you saw earlier. That is a 10-year plan. You only see the first 6 years of that plan here because that is the requirement prescriptively that we are obligated to put forward to the state and the county government. So it does take into account our existing obligations, those that we have already underway, and we fully intend to continue to fulfill and discharge, as well as launching into the new era of capital improvement projects that are informed by the information that was gleaned from the MGT studies. And then finally, the 4th page is the state subset. It is the same 6-year plan, but the state wants us to depict for them what is their projected obligation over that next 6-year span as well, so that they can begin to take stock of what our funding requests will be in the out years, what type of obligations are we going to be asked them to help support and contribute. So with that, that concludes our presentation. As I said earlier, we will have a much more thorough briefing, and we'll have some extended period of time set aside where we will go into each and every one of the projects uniquely, talk about the aspects of it, the funding requirement, the timing aspects, the anticipated state rated capacities, et cetera. We will go project by project by project on during the workshop the evening of the 15th. Again, that will be scheduled for 6 p.m. here in this various room. What I would hope is that the board would take the time between now and then, certainly to begin to familiarize themselves with the process, begin to formulate questions, working with the superintendent. Certainly, if there's information that you want us, in addition to what we are already ready to come prepared to present to you during the workshop, if there's other information you want, certainly work with the superintendent on those. We'll be happy to amass that so that we can come fully prepared to place you in an informed decision at the conclusion of the workshop, so that at the end of the workshop and given the public input that you'll receive at your Board of Education meeting that next evening, you're in a good position to be able to take action on the superintendent's request. And with that, ma'am, we will turn it over to you and your colleagues.
I don't have any lights up here for my colleagues. Oh, Mrs. Birch.
I just wanted real quick clarification on Severnburg High School replacement on the page that talks about county funding and state funding. Did the county forward fund that project?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
So they're getting their money back from the state?
Yes, so we are not asking, we will not be asking for general county funding. This will be money from the state, essentially to repay the county government. As you indicate, the county government should be applauded for
Yes, absolutely.
forward funding. Many jurisdictions around the state of Maryland do, in fact, forward fund projects.
And this was the first time we've really had that, right?
It is the first one in a very long period
Right.
of time. It is something that I would love to work collaboratively with the administration and the council to see if we can look for forward funding opportunities, as well as increasing our capacity to do projects. As you know, the MGT work, and we'll go into this in much more detail, essentially outlined about a $2.1 billion with a B liability for this district. The prior MGT study at that time had about a $1.5 billion liability. That's grown to 2.1, largely because we have grown as a county, our buildings have continued to age, our programs have expanded, our magnet offerings, et cetera, have continued to expand as well. That's led us to a $2.1 billion infrastructure backlog, but that's for schools alone. It is critical, not for this Board of Education, because you know, and you're advocates for the school system, but for the public at large to know that as a county, we obviously have other infrastructure needs too. Our roads, our bridges, our source stations, our water towers, our police stations, our fire stations, our libraries, and I could go on, including our partners at the community college that Dr. Arlotto works with as well. So we look forward to talking with the county about not only forward funding, but how are there opportunities for us to expand our ability to undertake a more aggressive and a larger capital program, so that over the course of the next 10 years, we are in fact able to tackle all of those projects and won't be at the end of that 10-year period of time left with schools that we had intended to accomplish, Ms. Ritchie, and yet for a variety of reasons, largely economic, we were not able to get to. So there's a lot of heavy lifting ahead, but I think I'm hopeful that Severna Park was our first glimpse into this more collaborative and conducive environment.
Mrs. Hummer.
I'm sure some of these will be answered, some of my concerns will be answered at the workshop, but I did have one question. As we look at the MGT study and we talk about how the priorities are set based on the most needs, so that special interest or things can't bring ahead, but I do see that based on this capital budget, the Crofton High School is ahead of 2 of the elementary schools that are on the MGT priority list. Why is that?
It largely has to do with we have the capacity at Crofton, because we do not have an existing building. We do not have to cross that feasibility study hurdle. We are currently doing the viability study with the $350,000 that has been apportioned to that will pre-position and get a lot of those site and civil and environmental assessments done in the current year, that come next year we'll be able to move right into full design on the Crofton project, while we will have to be going through the feasibility studies of those existing schools. So that's got a lot to do with it. It was simply the logistics, pending availability of funds, the logistical hurdles and obstacles to the Crofton project are not as intense as some of the existing projects. That's one piece of it. The second piece of it is there is this cash flow and affordability element to it. There always will be, and this is going to be maybe some of the biggest discussions, going back to Mrs. Burgess' question earlier with the county, we are on the cusp of finishing to pay off Severna Park High School. Certainly the state needs to help us repay the county because of the forward funding element, but we'll be paying that off. We will be looking to construct not just the Crofton High School, but 2 Old Mill High Schools and the 2 middle schools, et cetera. So being able to begin Crofton and begin to construct it and pay it off helps the cash flow perspective as well. And again, we can go into that in more details, but for funding authorities who have to set tax rates, to have to set bonds, et cetera, and some of those are already locked in at the current rate, they don't have the ability to ride this huge roller coaster of up and down revenue streams, because tax rates or capital gains rates or whatever only change incrementally in any given year. So a lot of it has to do, again, with the logistics, and we will spend a lot of quality time talking about that during the workshop, I'm imagine. So there's a logistical aspect to it, and then there's a funding or a fiscal fundability aspect to it as well. And I'll be glad to, again, when we have a chance to meet, go into both of those in much greater depth.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, we will move on. Item 6.01 is a review item, award of contracts. Is there any board questions or comments? Any public comments? And then our last item is a consent item, award of contracts, and this is information to action. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? Dr. Arlato, or all those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend the Board of Education award contract number 16-036 for professional development early literacy to Staff Development for Educators Incorporated in the amount of $104,800.
Is there any public comment about this item? All those in favor? Motion passes 900. The board, as Mr. Sheknovich said, will hold a workshop on the FY 2017 CIP and capital budget at 6 p.m. Tuesday, September 15th here in the boardroom. And the public is welcome to attend, but no public testimony will be taken until our board meeting on September 16th, which is an evening meeting at 7 p.m. And we'll have a hearing on the 2017 CIP and capital budget then. We also have a policy committee meeting coming up on Wednesday, September 9th at 1 p.m. And I will have Mrs. Nelly.
I would like to move that we go into closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter.
All those in favor? This portion of the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you in a couple weeks.